I never imagined a single sentence could change the course of everything I believed about my life. Yet, there it was casual, almost dismissive, but heavy enough to make my chest tighten. It's fine. Just go along with it. Michael's words floated in the air, smooth and careless, but beneath them lingered a tension I couldn't ignore. I laughed nervously, masking the sudden jolt of unease, pretending that everything was normal. But deep down, a part of me recoiled, sensing that this moment was the beginning of a fracture I hadn't seen coming. Michael had always been the anchor in my world, the steady presence I relied on when everything else felt uncertain. He had a way of making me feel safe, of turning ordinary days into something quietly extraordinary. His laugh could fill a room, not loudly, but warmly, leaving behind a trace of comfort I had grown addicted to. His eyes, dark and attentive, seemed to see through to the core of me, making me feel known in a way that few people ever had. I loved him for this steadiness, this quiet dependability that had defined our 7 years together. But love, I was about to learn, does not make one immune to deception. Our life had the comfortable rhythm of routine, weekday dinners cooked together, lazy Saturday mornings spent wandering the local farmers market, evenings spent curled up with books or old films. I had believed that we shared everything, our joys, our frustrations, even our secrets. Yet lately, something felt off. Michael's explanations were often vague. Late work meeting, extra client calls, a friend from the office. I had nodded, trusting his words, telling myself that suspicion was unnecessary, even unkind, and yet a whisper of doubt had started to settle in my mind. Subtle at first, like a shadow at the corner of my vision. There were small signs I tried to dismiss: an unfamiliar perfume on his jacket, an evasive glance when I asked a simple question, but I rationalized them away. Love demanded faith, or so I told myself. That night, as we walked along the wet city streets, neon reflections shimmering on puddles, I felt a strange dissonance. The rain had stopped, leaving behind the scent of damp asphalt and roasted chestnuts drifting from street vendors. Michael held my hand loosely, his thumb brushing mine occasionally, but the warmth I had always relied upon felt absent, replaced by an intangible distance. And when he repeated the words, "Just go along with it," I realized I was standing on the precipice of a truth I didn't yet understand, a truth that would challenge everything I had built with him. Everything I thought I knew about trust, love, and loyalty. I didn't know then that those 6 words would echo in my mind for months, shaping every choice, every doubt, and every heartbreak to come. After that night, I couldn't stop noticing the cracks that had been quietly forming beneath the surface of our life. Michael, the man I thought I knew completely, suddenly felt like a stranger inhabiting the same apartment. It wasn't that he had changed overnight. He still laughed at the same jokes, still cooked pasta with his signature clumsy charm, but there was a subtle tension in his movements, a hesitation in his voice that betrayed an unspoken distance. I am Clara, and for 7 years, my identity had intertwined with his. I had built a life around our routines, our shared jokes, and our quiet evenings on the sofa. Friends often described us as the perfect couple, though I had always brushed it off, thinking love wasn't about perfection but about the small, enduring gestures that kept you tethered to one another. Yet now I felt untethered, as though every familiar corner of our apartment whispered reminders that trust could fracture without warning. Our routines, once comforting, now felt like subtle mirrors reflecting unease. Michael spent long hours at the office, or so he said, returning home exhausted yet alert in ways that seemed unnatural. I noticed the faint scent of a perfume I didn't recognize, the tiny smudges on his phone screen, the careful way he avoided eye contact when I asked casual questions. Each detail was small enough to ignore individually, but together they formed a mosaic I couldn't unsee. And then there was Amanda. I had heard her name in passing once or twice when Michael laughed over something work-related. "Amanda from the office," he had said lightly. "She's brilliant. She's funny too." I smiled politely, nodding as if his words were harmless, yet something about the ease with which he mentioned her made my stomach churn. Something unnameable whispered that she was more than just a coworker, and that he wanted me not to notice. Despite my suspicions, I told myself I was overreacting. After all, I had always believed in seeing the best in people, especially in the person I loved. But the tension lingered, subtle yet persistent, like a shadow stretching across the sunlit parts of our life. I began to observe him more closely, taking in every expression, every tone, every hesitation. searching for confirmation of the nagging feeling I didn't want to confront. It was during one late evening, while Michael was supposedly finishing a project, that I realized I could no longer dismiss my intuition. I had been sitting at the kitchen table scrolling absent-mindedly through my phone when I noticed his laptop left open on the counter. An email preview caught my eye. A few words, just a glimpse, but enough to pierce the fragile illusion of security I'd been clinging to, and in that instant, I understood that the life I thought was ordinary, safe and predictable, had quietly begun to unravel. I didn't yet know the full extent of the betrayal, but the faint outlines of a truth too heavy to ignore were beginning to emerge. Every familiar touch, every shared laugh now carried the weight of suspicion, and I was left with a choice: confront the shadow I sensed lurking beneath our life, or continue pretending it didn't exist. I didn't realize then how irreversible that choice would become. After that glimpse of his laptop, I couldn't return to ignorance. Every moment with Michael became charged with a quiet apprehension I could neither name nor dismiss. The small, comforting details of our life, the aroma of his cooking, the familiar creak of our apartment stairs, the rhythm of our shared laughter now carried an undertone of doubt. I began to notice the patterns I'd once overlooked, the late-night texts he quickly silenced when I entered the room, the sudden urgency in his voice when he mentioned Amanda's name, the way he sometimes stared past me as though I weren't there. One evening, I followed my instincts and asked him outright, my voice trembling but steady, "Michael, is there something you're not telling me?" He paused, searching my face, and for a fleeting moment I thought I might see honesty there. But instead he offered a practiced smile, calm and measured. "It's fine," he said, almost too lightly. "Just go along with it." The words were the same as that night when the seed of unease first sprouted. Yet now they rang with a different, sharper meaning. They weren't reassurance, they were a subtle admission, a barrier meant to protect him while leaving me suspended in uncertainty. My stomach tightened and I felt my pulse echo in my ears. Go along with it? What is it that I'm supposed to go along with? Days turned into weeks of careful observation. I began to catalog every minor irregularity, every hesitated glance or unexplained absence. Friends noticed the tension in my eyes, asking if I was all right, but I couldn't confide in anyone, not fully. How could I articulate the gnawing suspicion that the man I loved was living a secret life, while also fearing the truth that might confirm it? Then came the night that changed everything. I had returned early from work, hoping to surprise him with dinner, and found him distracted, a barely concealed tension in his posture. A subtle perfume lingered in the air, unfamiliar and faint, and a quick glance at his phone revealed a notification that made my heart stall. It was a message from Amanda, simple but intimate, full of shared jokes and lingering affection. My hand shook as the pieces clicked into place. The distance I'd felt for weeks, the strange hesitations, the dismissive words all pointed to a truth I was no longer able to ignore. I confronted him immediately, my voice rising despite my effort to remain composed. "How long, Michael? How could you betray me like this?" His face drained of color, a flicker of guilt crossing his features. He didn't deny it, he couldn't. Instead, he looked at me with a complex mixture of shame, fear, and something I didn't yet understand. For the first time, something I didn't yet understand. Our shared life felt fragile, like a glass ornament teetering on the edge of a shelf. The laughter, the warmth, the comfort, they all seemed suspended, waiting for the next move, for the revelation that could either shatter us completely or force us to rebuild from the fragments. And in that suspended silence, I realized one undeniable truth: nothing would ever feel ordinary again. It wasn't until a rainy evening, months after the first uneasy hints of betrayal, that the full weight of the truth hit me like a tidal wave. Michael had been unusually quiet all day, moving around the apartment with a tension that made the air feel thick. I watched him from the doorway of the kitchen, the dim light casting shadows across his face, wondering if I could endure the words I knew were coming. "I need to tell you everything," he said finally, his voice low and fragile, carrying a weight I had never heard before. He avoided my eyes at first, fiddling with the edge of a coffee cup as though it could anchor him. My chest tightened. I nodded, feeling the mix of fear and anticipation twisting in my stomach. He started slowly, recounting the details of the affair, each word hitting like a stone. The late-night messages, the stolen weekends, the emotional intimacy that had grown unchecked. He explained that it had started innocently a friendly coworker, a laugh shared after long hours, but that it had spiraled into something neither of us could have predicted. As he spoke, I felt my world tilt, the floor beneath me shaking with the enormity of his confession. The most painful part wasn't just the betrayal itself, it was the ease with which he had hidden it. The casual way he had once told me to just go along with it. I remembered that phrase like a sharp echo in my mind, and suddenly every minor hesitation, every subtle lie, every late night made sense. The facade of our ordinary life had been carefully maintained, even as it crumbled from within, yet as he spoke, I also glimpsed the fragility behind his actions, the guilt that haunted him, the shame that he carried silently. It struck me that he had not just betrayed me. He had betrayed himself. There was no excuse, no justification that could erase the hurt. But there was a truth I had to acknowledge. Michael was not wholly a villain, and I was not entirely a victim. We were both human, flawed in ways that intersected dangerously. I wanted to yell, to demand that he explain how he could risk everything we had built. Instead, I sat in silence, feeling the raw, jagged edges of emotion cut through me. Every memory we shared, the small laughter, the gentle touches, the comfort of his presence, now carried a shadow. I realized that our life together had changed irreversibly. The man I had trusted completely was no longer the one I could take for granted. By the time he finished speaking, the apartment was silent except for the soft patter of rain against the windows. We sat across from each other, the weight of honesty pressing down on us both. In that moment, I understood that facing the truth, no matter how painful, was the only way forward. There was no turning back to innocence or ignorance. Our life had shifted irrevocably, and now the only choice was how we would navigate the path ahead. And though the air was heavy with sorrow, there was also a fragile thread of clarity, a recognition that confronting betrayal, while excruciating, was the first step toward understanding, and perhaps someday toward healing. The months that followed the revelation were a delicate balancing act between heartbreak and hesitant reconstruction. Our home, once filled with effortless laughter and familiar warmth, felt quieter, suspended in an uneasy stillness. I watched Michael navigate this new reality, his remorse evident in the way he lingered in my presence, careful not to overstep, yet desperate to show that he still wanted to be part of my life. Every apology, every tentative attempt at connection reminded me of the depth of our bond, but also of how fragile it had become. I spent countless nights replaying the details of his betrayal in my mind, dissecting the casual words he had once spoken, just go along with it, and understanding them now for what they truly were, a shield. A plea for avoidance, a silent acknowledgement of guilt. The memory of that phrase lingered like a shadow stitched into the fabric of our relationship, reminding me of the trust we had lost and the vigilance it now demanded. Yet, amidst the lingering pain, there were small moments that felt like tentative stitches attempting to repair the fabric of our shared life. The quiet morning when he made coffee just the way I liked it without being asked. The fleeting touch of his hand on mine during a movie night. Even the shared silence, once heavy with uncertainty, slowly became a space where we could exist together without pretense. These moments were fragile, easily broken. Yet they hinted at a possibility I hadn't dared imagine in the wake of betrayal. That connection could coexist with the memory of hurt. I realized that healing was not linear. There were days when anger surged uncontrollably, when the sight of his face reminded me of the fissures in our foundation. There were other days when a fleeting smile or a shared memory softened the edges of my grief. And through it all, I came to understand that forgiveness is not an erasure of the past, but a conscious decision to accept the totality of someone's flaws and your own capacity to endure them. Looking back, I see now that the phrase I had feared so deeply was not just a harbinger of betrayal. It was a doorway to awareness. Michael's words forced me to confront uncomfortable truths, to navigate uncertainty, and ultimately to reclaim my understanding of trust, love, and self-respect. I am not unscarred, and the past continues to echo in subtle ways. But the journey has taught me resilience, introspection, and the quiet power of facing reality head-on. Some nights, when the apartment is still and the city hums softly outside our windows, I reflect on the fragility of human connection, the complexity of desire, and the choices that define us. I realize that life, like love, is never simple or guaranteed. It is filled with mistakes, betrayals, and unforeseen turns. And yet, in navigating those turns, we discover not only the depths of others, but also the strength within ourselves to endure, forgive, and sometimes begin anew.